Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining us on another ConsenSys Cypherpunk Hackathon workshop. Today, we're going to be talking about ETH2 staking and the future with Coogan and Ben, and it's a lot of great content. So thank you for joining us. Just Shay, quick housekeeping around CrowdCast, which is the platform we're using here. On the right-hand side, there is the chat that will be ongoing throughout the workshop, so feel free to add questions or chat away in that right side. I'll be keeping an eye on it so that Coogan and Ben can focus on the content, and I can kind of help mention anything that needs to be mentioned. Also, if you haven't already, please, there are polls at the bottom. If you can fill those out, this will really help Ben and Coogan get a sense of where you guys are at so they know how to focus the content. Also, if you have any questions during this, Ben and Coogan will be stopping periodically, but in the meantime, if you can queue those up in the Ask a Question queue at the bottom there, then they can quickly answer any questions that you have at that time. And then we'll also have some time at the very end to go over any questions. And if you are interested, we can queue you up onto the stage to ask your question, but you can certainly just leave your question in the queue and we'll answer that without you having to come on stage. Also, there is a green button at the bottom that says see more workshops and sign up for the hackathon. So this is a link to go to our Confluence page, which has links to RSVP for all the workshops that we have going on this month, which are really great. We paste them so that you could essentially attend each one if you wanted to. And also, if you'd like to participate in the actual hackathon, there's a sign-up form. So that's where you can find that. And finally, a real neat feature of CrowdCast in the chat, if you do type something in and you type a question mark, before you hit enter, you'll notice a little orange button that pops up and says add to the question queue. So you can quickly add a question to the queue there if you'd like. So without further ado, I'll hand the mic to Ben and Coogan.
Hello, cypherpunks. Welcome to ETH2 staking and the future. So I'll introduce us first. So I'm Ben, lead product manager of Teku, which is our Ethereum 2 client in the protocols team, formerly known as Pegasus. I've been working on Ethereum 2 for a little while now, since about the beginning of 2018. And mostly I just do writing about Ethereum. I write every other week at ETH2.news, what's new in ETH2. I'm just a warm-up act today. I'll be just bringing everybody up to speed about where we are with Ethereum 2, and then Coogan will be doing the good stuff about staking and earning in the protocol. So I'll start with the overview of where we are, where we're going, and then pause for some Q&A. I won't be able to see the chat or the questions as we go, but we can have a stop there and deal with any pending questions. Then Coogan's going to take an overview of options for staking and walking through setting yourself up as a staker in Ethereum 2. And then we'll do a joint Q&A at the end. So what is Ethereum 2? What are the goals? Well, we've got the 3 S's. It's sustainability. Proof of work uses massively inefficient amounts of energy to secure the network. Ethereum 2 addresses this with proof of stake. And its scalability. So Ethereum 1, as we know, the Ethereum network is full. Gas prices are very high. And Ethereum 2 addresses this with sharding. And we'll talk about proof of stake and sharding primarily in this presentation. But the third S is security, and this is a sort of no compromise area. Everything is built on a foundation of keeping the network secure. And in blockchain terms, security means a number of things. It means that we are going for maximum decentralization, maximum censorship resistance, maximal permissionlessness, keeping the network resilient, which means live, that it keeps producing blocks, and keeping the network safe in the sort of technical sense that it always acts correctly. So that's a bedrock of the whole activity, maintaining these properties as we go forward. So things have changed in the Ethereum 2 roadmap more than once. This is a sort of introductory historical view of the plan, and this is probably still the dominant narrative. So if this is your mental model of Ethereum 2, then we're going to update you in the next few minutes. But the original plan, and I say original, this goes back about 3 years to the middle of 2018, was to build a new chain and to call that Ethereum 2. So we have had a 3-phase plan: phase 0, phase 1, phase 2, and the goal was to build out this new scalable proof of stake chain, writing all the errors we made in Ethereum 1 in its design, and eventually at some point when we got to the end of phase 2 and the chain was up and running, to migrate Ethereum as we know it over to the new chain and subsume it in the new Ethereum 2 chain. So it's a new thing. Things have changed, and we'll talk about that. So this is what the current roadmap looks like, and this is vastly simplified, but hopefully captures the main elements going on here. So we have retained the proof of stake beacon chain from the previous plans. You can see that at the bottom, and we're calling that the ConsenSys layer. And we're retaining sharding, but things happen in a slightly different order. Before we get to sharding, we've got something called the merge. And this is the point at which we upgrade the current proof of work Ethereum 1 chain to proof of stake. And the Ethereum 1 becomes the execution layer, or the execution part of Ethereum. And the beacon chain becomes the ConsenSys part of Ethereum. And eventually we end up with a scalable, sustainable Ethereum, not Ethereum 2.0, just Ethereum. So the Ethereum 2 labeling, this naming, is being sort of gradually deprecated at the moment, because we're not replacing Ethereum, we're upgrading Ethereum. And we'll go into what all of this means a little more. Where are we? This is where we are today, roughly speaking. We're sort of halfway between the start of the beacon chain and the merge. Beacon chain's been running for almost 6 months, and we expect the merge in about 6 months' time. And then there's a whole roadmap ahead of us. What's driven this sort of change from our nice, neat 3-phase roadmap that we started with 3 years ago to what we have now with this merge of Ethereum 1 and Ethereum 2 prioritized as early as possible? Well, firstly, it's just increasing frustration with proof of work. We've seen miners kind of throw their weight around with EIP 1559 and threatening all sorts of terrible things. We've got these sort of environmental optics problem, a lot of discussion around NFTs in the sort of non-blockchain community, some misinformation, but some accurate information. And, you know, the whole thing has revealed proof of work to be a bit of an embarrassment, to be honest. And the issuance rate currently on Ethereum is way higher than it needs to be to sustain the chain. This is going to proof of work miners, but we could reduce the block rewards to address this, or we could just move to proof of stake. And the other factor is the emergence of new technologies. So since we started this plan, rollups and other L2 technologies have emerged as potentially much better candidates for scaling the chain. Rollups provide scaling outside the core protocol, so they can be developed by other teams and in parallel, and people can experiment much more easily, and it's not reliant on the progress of a small bunch of core developers. If it goes wrong, it doesn't break the protocol. You can experiment much more freely. And also there's been a realization that it's feasible to run the EVM on the beacon chain, or couple the EVM, the Ethereum virtual machine, with the beacon chain in rather a neat way, which we'll look at in a moment. And the sharding model that we have and rollups go together very nicely. Sharding can provide a very powerful data source for rollups, and so the whole thing has come together quite nicely. I'll digress briefly into rollups. Checks time. Yeah, okay, I think we're good. There were a couple of posts late last year which really set a new direction. Vitalik posted about a new rollup-centric roadmap for Ethereum. and asked the question, what would it look like? And fairly soon afterwards, Mikhail Kalinin from Pegasus posted an idea, a proposal for an executable beacon chain. And these two really gained huge momentum and defined the new direction. So this is not the most intuitive diagram, but on the left we have today Ethereum, and there are three things that we need to parallelize if we're going to scale Ethereum. We have data, which is blocks. We have execution, which is the EVM plowing through transactions. And we have state, which is storing the result of all those transactions. And if we're going to scale, we need to parallelize that so that not every node in the network needs to see everything that's happening. And the original plan was really to have many of those in parallel. The new plan looks like the right side, highly simplified. So we have a beacon chain and it's tightly coupled to an EVM, and the EVM has its own execution and state, just a single copy as it does today. Nothing much changes there. But we also attach to the beacon chain parallel data shards. I've put 4 here. There are 64 planned, and they're blockchains. They're just data blocks in parallel holding transaction data. And on top of all this, we add the rollup ecosystem. And again, I've shown 4 here, but there will be many, many of these. And effectively, they really only interact with the data shards in the best case. And each rollup manages off-chain the state and execution. So that's where the parallelism comes from. The rollups take it out of the protocol and deal with all the state and the execution, which is a big problem today, off-chain, but gain the security by putting the data on-chain, which is great because we have shards to handle that, and only very infrequently interacting with the EVM, basically for dispute resolution purposes, which hopefully shall be rare. And so putting this all together, we've achieved our parallelism. We have data parallelism through shards and state and execution parallelism through the rollups. So there's a rough outline of what the final state looks like. So where are we? What's the status? I'm going to talk first about the beacon chain, which is the bit that I've circled in orange at the bottom there. Beacon chain, it's been running since the 1st of December last year, so getting on for 6 months now. Here's a view which I took a little bit earlier today from the Beacon Chain Explorer. So we've had over 1 million slots. A slot is a 12-second interval that is supposed to contain a block. Most of them do. So we've had over 1 million blocks so far on the Beacon chain. There are getting on for 4.3 million ether staked, which is incredible. Some, I don't know, 12, 13, 14 billion dollars worth. It's hard to keep track. And there are 133,000 plus active validators with a queue of 4,000 to enter. So we can onboard about 900 validators a day, according to the protocol. So that's people have started piling onto the Beacon chain again recently. Coinbase is coming online. Lido is coming online with their activities, and a lot more are joining the network. Rocket Pool will be coming on soon, and that will also boost numbers. So that's where we are. Things are running pretty smoothly, all except for a little incident about 2 weeks ago when the Prism client stopped producing blocks for a few hours, which meant that about 70% of the slots were empty for a while. That's the only wobble we've had so far, but otherwise things have been running extremely smoothly. I mean, better than we could possibly have imagined. I'm not going to dwell on this. Coogan's going to speak much more about staking. I just wanted to highlight there are 4 clients, one of which is ours, which is Teku. You can, if you wish to participate, you can stake either yourself, as I do, using Teku here, or on a VPS in the cloud, or via a staking pool or a staking service such as Codefi Staking. Just wanted to mention, since we're here, that Codefi Staking for ConsenSys employees is offering to host your validator for free for the first one, and for $100 flat rate for subsequent validators, which is frankly a steal. You will not get a better deal anywhere else. and I can vouch for them because they use Teku. What can you expect if you are staking? Currently, returns in Ether terms are around 7.5% a year. It goes down as more validators join the network. But interestingly, after the merge, which we'll speak about in a moment, you might expect something more like 25% per annum, at least initially, because you start receiving transaction fees in addition to just staking rewards. And now, that won't last because more and more people will pile on with those kind of rates available. But at least for a while, some very juicy rewards will be available. This is my favorite diagram, just to blow the Teku team's horn briefly. This is during Q1 this year, just comparing with Prism, Lighthouse, and Nimbus, which clients did best on any particular day in terms of staking rewards earned, and on 2/3 of the days in the quarter, Teku earned the highest rewards amongst all the clients. Very proud of that. Okay, so that's where we are with the beacon chain, all running very nicely. What about the merge? The merge is future, and let's see what it looks like. So the plan for the merge is something like this. What we do is we are taking existing ETH1 clients like Geth or Besu or Nethermind and ripping out the proof of work component from them, but other than that, leaving them pretty much as is. And on the right-hand side, we're taking existing ETH2 clients and coupling them with the ETH1 clients. And ETH1 clients become the execution client, and the ETH2 clients become the ConsenSys client. And the ConsenSys client is driving in this scenario, so it's in control. And we add to them both this API between them, whereby the ConsenSys client can, when it's turn to propose a block to the network, can request the ETH1 client to make a block, the execution client, to make a block containing transactions. And when the ConsenSys client receives a block on the network, it can call the ETH1 client, the execution client, to insert that block into its chain. So the ConsenSys client is driving in that sense. The execution client is just handling transactions and forming them into blocks and maintaining the transaction blockchain, just as it does today. The only difference is that it doesn't have proof of work driving, it has proof of stake. And this model, I'd call it the minimum viable merge. It really is the fastest route to switching off proof of work. It's the least amount of work required on each side. It's not the cleanest model in the world, but it is definitely practical and deliverable. And nice features about it is that it's almost entirely transparent to existing Ethereum applications and tools. So all of the wallets will still work. All of Solidity will still work. Block Explorers might need a bit of a change, but we're leaving the JSON RPC API in place as is. And so it's least disruptive to existing applications and development work. And also by sort of just upgrading the consensus on the Ethereum chain rather than putting down a new chain, we have much less confusion about, are there going to be two coins, and am I going to have to transfer my ETH over or anything like that? So it's just conceptually a lot simpler to say this is an upgrade to the existing chain. What's going on the merge? Well, at the moment we have this thing called Rayonism, which is prototyping the merge and sharding. It's under the ETH Global Scaling Ethereum Hackathon. And Rayonism is a style of Russian abstract art, which you can see here. There was a very briefly lived testnet put up last Friday. The goal was just to run it for a few hours, but it had this mix of clients. So you can see that each ConsenSys client, Teku, Prism, Lighthouse, Nimbus, was paired with each execution client, Geth, Besu, Nethermind. So it had 12 combinations altogether. And it was reasonably successful. There were glitches. Teku did pretty well. Nimbus did pretty well. But eventually it was up and running pretty well. So next week is planned a much longer-lived test, a week-long test. In the meantime, clients have had a chance to run test vectors and fix bugs and so forth. Everybody went into this test very cold without having done any interactions before, so it wasn't expected to be very smooth. The initial one was called Steklo, which means glass in Russian, and was expected to be fragile. But yeah, good results. Final question, when merge? Renism is still in progress, which is the sort of proof of concept of it. Assuming that results are good, that we don't find any horrible blockers and things that just need a lot more research doing on them, then the Ethereum all-core devs have declared that they will prioritize the merge after the London fork in July that delivers EIP 1559. So the merge becomes the next thing. There may be another quick ETH1 fork slipped in the meantime, but basically the commitment is to prioritize the merge. And among devs, there's good momentum building for a merge this year, but certainly we're aiming to get it done by Q1 next year. Vitalik, who is, I have to say, a noted optimist, thinks that this is reasonable, and you can visit ethmerge.com to learn more about the merge. And there we go. That's all I've got for you. I will stop sharing and we can take some questions. What do we got, Shay?
Sorry, slow to getting up there. All right, we got some good questions in the queue, Ben. So let's start with the first one. Let me record this. What happens to the ETH earned while staking Beacon Chain before the launch? Will the Beacon Chain be reset for ETH2 launch? And this is from Shane Jonas.
Yeah, so everything earned on the Beacon Chain remains, and shortly after the merge, there will be a mechanism put in place so that you can withdraw your Beacon Chain Ether and your rewards back to the Ethereum mainnet, that you know and love. So you can put it in your standard Ethereum account and transact with it as usual. So within a few months of the merge, you'll be able to extract your staking rewards and the staking principal if you wish to do so.
Great. And there was one more question. What is Beacon used for? In other words, what transactions are running there?
So the Beacon Chain just sustains the consensus mechanism. So it doesn't in itself carry transactions. So what it does is manage the validators. And the validators are committees that vote on blocks and the validity of blocks and that they've seen blocks. And the Beacon Chain contains the coordination and the record of all that voting activity. It will, after the merge, it will contain the ETH1 transactions, but it doesn't handle those transactions. That's the work of the the execution client, the current ETH1 client. So a little bit complicated conceptually, but ETH1's just a consensus. The Beacon Chain is just a consensus mechanism that replaces proof of work.
Okay, thank you. And that was from Lorenzo. We have a couple more questions. Keep going, Ben, or did you want to? Yeah. All right. Yeah. So we have one. This is from Chris.eth, and he said, "Thank you, Ben, and incredible knowledge and insight as usual. Can you tell us about shared secret validators?"
Secret shared validators. Yeah, it's a bit of a big topic to do quickly now, but this is a way to trustlessly pool staking so that you can split keys between a number of validators, not necessarily ones that you trust, and you gain resilience and potentially performance in doing so. So it's a sort of multi-party compute way to run validator infrastructure that's gaining some interest at the moment. If you look at my latest What's New in ETH2 at eth2.news, I link through to a couple of things there that you can read a bit more about it.
Excellent, thank you. Just a couple more. This is from Nicholas. How is the 25% APR calculated for after the merge? It's a lot, isn't it? Does the validators need, or do the validators need so many to keep the network secure?
Yeah, so this is a bit hard to judge because this is based on transaction rewards. Now, when the whole thing was designed, transaction fees were much, much lower, were a tiny fraction of the block reward. Even 18 months ago, this was true. Now, transaction fees are maybe 1 Ether or 2 Ether per block, which is comparable to the block reward itself. So modeling this is a little bit hard because we don't know what the effect of EIP 1559 will be exactly, though there are a range of estimates. But if we make assumptions about how many validators will be on the network and what the effect of EIP 1559 will be, then the number comes out as a sort of conservative mid guess of 25%. Might be higher, might be lower. It will go down because more validators will join the network in order to milk this, and then that number is just shared across more validators. It doesn't affect issuance, so that's not issuance. Keeping the network secure is about issuance, and the issuance is about 1/10 of the current issuance on Ethereum with proof of work. The transaction fees are just recycled Ether, so it's not really paying to keep the network secure.
Okay, great. And then this one is from, I think I'm saying it right, Aladdin. Do we have a rough estimate on the network TPS after the merge?
Yeah, so the merge itself doesn't change very much. There might be some small scaling effect. We might be able to double transactions per second or something like that, but it's not going to be the big hike that we all want to see. Really, that's going to be delivered by rollups and the sharding. There are estimates, but again, these are sort of highly optimistic, assuming everything works perfectly and all resources feed into rollups, but 100,000 transactions per second is a finger in the air, sort of upper limit. We're probably looking at thousands to tens of thousands, practically speaking, after we've got sharding in place and the rollup ecosystem is functioning well.
Great. This one is from Jonathan Beckman. He says, 32 ETH is a high barrier of entry at the current price, valuing a validator at approximately 128,000. While pooling solutions like Rocket Pool look promising, is there any plan to change the stake amount required to run your own validator?
Yeah, again, this is another thing that's changed. Nobody envisaged this Ether price when the network was designed. I think the answer is protocols like Rocket Pool. The problem with changing it in protocol is that first it's very complicated because we already have this value set, and 130,000 stakers already staking 32 ETH. And the other is that it wasn't the price that set the number 32. It was an estimate of what's the maximum number of validators which is reasonable to sustain in the system. We can't have 100 million validators. That just doesn't work. It's too many. So we need to set an Ethereum number relative to the total supply of ETH, which is sustainable. And it's expected that about 10% of all Ether will stake. So that's kind of where the number comes from, and that gives us a reasonable number of validators at that point, something like 4 million, I think. Yeah, something like that.
And the last one before we move on to Coogan, and this is coming in from Nicholas again, will stackers be able to extract reward while keeping the initial stake in the validator, or will it be all or nothing?
This is TBD. It's a great question. The work is being done by one of Nicolas' colleagues as we speak on getting partial withdrawals enabled. So ideally, in the best case, when we enable withdrawals, we will also enable partial withdrawals, so you can acquire your staking rewards without actually stopping staking, which will be a nice feature. The alternative is to exit and then re-enter, which is a long process and and just not good for the beacon chain. So yeah, that's the intention. Great.
Thank you,
we
Ben.
plowed through all those. Terrific. Coogan, the floor is yours.
Good job.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ben. It is so cool. One of the best parts of looking at ConsenSys is all the Great folks that we have, Ben included, and Raquel and Meredith and Adrian and all the great team doing protocol that are working on the stuff that we get to have access to. So, okay. So, can folks see my screen? See my slides here? Okay, there's an avocado.
And one more thing before we begin, Coogan.
Yeah.
In case anybody is interested, there is the option for us to bring you onto the screen to ask the question yourself if you'd like to. So if that is of interest to you, when you add the question to the queue, just say stage in parentheses so that will bring you on to ask the question. Okay?
Sounds good. And we'll do prices right.
Coogan.
We'll do prices right.
Kind of
come down to the stage. Great, wonderful. So my name is Coogan. I work with ConsenSys Academy, but more broadly work with developer relations, which is a newer team that's formed here. And I just want to tell folks a little bit about what that is, which explains sort of my role in this presentation. Whenever you see an avocado next to somebody's name on Twitter, it typically means that they're a developer advocate, which is another name for developer relations. And essentially, we work as a team to provide support for developers and act as a liaison between developers and different products that we have. For ETH2, the goal was to highlight all the amazing products and the support that ConsenSys was creating, as well as being able to, I think, just sort of be a sort of a diary of somebody who was following the path of becoming a validator. So I'm just going to go over briefly that these series of articles that I started writing back in November here. And I ended up being four-part series tracing the setup before the blockchain Genesis launched, right after, and then sort of one in January talking about sort of monitoring and analyzing the data from the ETH2 validator, and then how to safely migrate your ETH 2.0 validator client. If folks would note, there is a poll at the bottom that we'd love for you to fill out, because I can talk about a number of different things during this presentation. I can see that some people are staking on ETH2, you're considering staking, but mainly, more importantly, kind of what would you like to go over next? So I'm just going to talk kind of briefly about what I've been doing here with these articles, as well as different options that are there. First, actually, here, we'll just go on to this thing, ways to stake. So, this is part of the Cypherpunk Hackathon, which is to encourage cross-product collaboration. And ETH2 is a great example of a way in which ConsenSys products are supporting each other and supporting the larger environment as well. So we're going to be talking today about Teku, obviously, that Ben is a part of. We're going to be talking about Infura, which has done some really important infrastructure work, and then Metamask as well as Codefi, that go into the different ways that you can stake. So, as Ben mentioned, you can stake on your own, and this is the approach that Ben and I have taken. So this is managing all aspects of the depositing, of submitting your data to the ETH1 chain, which then activates your validator on the ETH2 chain, as well as making sure that you're upgrading your client and doing that sort of thing. It can be done locally or virtually. And what that means is that Ben, for example, has his Metal Albert validator machine, as it's named, in his home, where he can see it, whereas I have one on a virtual private service, VPS. Initially, it was on Amazon Web Services, and now it's on one called DigitalOcean, if people are familiar with those services. So there are two different options there. If you want to stake on your own, it's best for people who have done something like this before. Part of the article was to walk people through it, but it was also to be able to provide kind of insight into the technical abilities that were required. However, I do have to say that particularly the Teku team in their Discord is extremely active, extremely supportive, and have been phenomenal. along this whole process. And so what's great about this is that, if you choose to stake on your own, you're going to be using Teku for your client, theoretically, Infura for an endpoint to ETH1 chain. You still need to sort of monitor the ETH1 chain for new validators. And obviously it's going to be much more after the merge occurs. And then Metamask, which you use to submit your deposit, that 32 ETH that we've been mentioning. Another option you can do is staking as a service. Now there's also sort of staking pools, which are also staking as a service. I'm going to sort of vaguely define staking as a service as multiples of 32 ETH. So this is for people who, again, still are meeting that what is now a very high threshold of 32 ETH to a service which handles all the validating process for you, all the management for a fee, much easier mental load. And this is very interesting for institutions. So, large funds or other sorts of organizations who would have great multiples of ETH that they would like to stake will typically employ staking as a service. As Ben mentioned, there's been an incredibly generous offer from Coogan and the Codefi Activate team to stake your first validator for free, and then for $100 for each client after that. Again, that's at 32 ETH. And I put the link in the message in the chat for folks who are interested in that. And what's nice about this is that, obviously Codefi Activate is managing the majority of this, but they're using a Teku client and they're also using Infura. So this is a really cool way. And I imagine they're using Metamask as well in certain cases to manage deposits. So again, just to highlight how this sort of cross-company coordination has happened. There are these ETH2 marketing or ETH2 product calls, and it's just really great to see that collaboration. The third option, which might be appealing to someone like Jonathan, or Jonathan mentioned Rocket Pool. So this is for folks who it's still staking as a service, but if you don't have the full 32 ETH required to stake a single client, you can use a staking pool. So what this looks like is that you contribute ETH to a staking pool, which stakes on your behalf. Now, that's sort of a vague term because it can look like a lot of different things. Rocket Pool is one example where Rocket Pool is a very interesting decentralized staking pool service that is building a whole new kind of network of people who are interested in staking, people who are interested in supporting staking. And they've kind of taken the DeFi yield farming model and applied it to this model. So if you're contributing, if you're like a validator in the Rocket Pool, you can get governance tokens, which allow you to vote. It's very sophisticated. I'll be totally honest, I haven't fully grasped it, but it's a very, very interesting option. And then, technically something like Codefi Activate would also be considered a staking pool. So you have a whole range of different options there. Just again, because it's the hackathon, I wanted to highlight the work of, I know there are a number of different people in the mesh working on this, but there's this community effort called the Ethereum Due Diligence Committee, which is going through and writing up these great reports on the different staking services that are available. And I think I actually got this from the ETH2 news, which is really excellent. That's where I get all my news. But this is a list of all the staking services. I don't know if it's complete, but this is, as you can see, like extremely comprehensive. You have things all the way Coinbase, which is custodial, and you're staking any amount. So, for example, somebody has ETH on Coinbase, I imagine there's some sort of button you can click and then you're able to stake it. You have your non-custodial options. Again, this is one of the great reasons that the Ethereum Due Diligence Committee and the work that Ben is doing is these are very new. And so people need to handle these very, very carefully and just be very, very aware of what you're getting into. So just this is probably the most furthest end of intensity in terms of risk. I guess there's all kinds of risk, but it's just particularly it's one label that fits a number of different operations. So I can put the link to that in there. Okay, I'm actually going to take I'm going to look and see if there are, just sort of see what people would like to go over next here. Oh, were you guys able to see the slides, right? Okay. Great. Okay, I'm just going to go through very quickly, just with the next couple of minutes, to the different options of things that we have, what it looks like to stake from a very broad picture. So the first is an initiative from ConsenSys and Ethereum Foundation and some other partners in the space called Launchpad. And I used Metamask for this product as well. This was essentially the gateway to becoming a validator and starting to secure the ETH. This is the site as it looked in November. It might be a little different now, but same sort of general idea. And essentially what you do here is there was a tremendous amount of disclaimers that they wanted really people to know that A, there was a very long lockup period for this, and then B, it's extremely risky. You need to be very careful about, be very aware of it. But as you can see here, there are these different steps over here. And just briefly going through that, without getting into too much detail, the ETH 2.0 world uses a different family of encryption called BLS, as compared to the current encryption service that Ethereum 1.0 uses to generate keys. And so the big part of this Launchpad process was you would generate these BLS keys locally on your machine, and you would sign a bit of data that would then go into a contract on Ethereum 1.0. We mentioned that ETH 2.0 clients have to look back at these contracts. So you're going to be looking for this signed bit of data that's signed twice. It's signed once using the wrapper of the ETH1 encryption layer, and then within that, there's another signature using the BLS scheme. And so it acts as this handshake protocol between the two, so that you can ensure that the people who are locking up that 32 ETH are also the validator clients that are going to be on the other end, even though those accounts will look different because they're using different private keys and different generation schemes for that. Here's the actual, this is from the actual deposit contract, and here's the deposit here, and this is your BLS signature here. For folks, this is a specific curve that they're using, this 1238.1. And so this was actually going on ETH1, but ETH2 validator clients were also looking at it as well. And so this is what Launchpad walked you through. It would sort of walk you through this basic sort of quiz to sort of see like what operating system you were on, and then you would download a simple bash script that would work through generating those keys on your end. Once you've generated those keys, you get a deposit file, which is a JSON object, which you place here. And then this is sort of the last step before you were sort of going, this is just sort of the checking to make sure, this is me, I was doing one validator for 32 ETH, which at that point I believe was about $10,000. And again, just kind of this last, flight check list, make sure it wasn't being phished, and then you would initiate these transactions. And there was a Metamask window would pop up. It would say transaction successful. However, this was before the Genesis block was mined, so I was just sort of the only wait period I have was before the actual Genesis block. However, Matt Garnett shared this this sort of rough back of the envelope calculation that if you were to validate, submit today, it would be ready by Friday. Which Ben can totally check me. I don't know the math on this. Matt said it looks roughly correct. I've seen some other times on Twitter earlier today, but essentially it's a matter of days. It's not going to be immediate, which can be a shock for some folks who might not be familiar with that. And so once you have that set up, once you have that validator client issued, you then need to set up your ETH2 client on a machine. And so for this, you have to have, again, that ETH1 endpoint. Some people use a full node, so they would sync a node using an ETH client, such as Hyperledger Besu or Geth. I ended up using an Infura endpoint. So I was pinging the Infura API, which is available very generously for free for folks. And then I was running Teku. And this was my initial AWS setup, which was probably the upper limit of what you needed to do. I ended up switching to DigitalOcean. It was significantly cheaper, and sort of judging on what the merge specs are going to be, they might need to do another migration. This is me setting up the Infura client. And then I actually was going to walk through installing Teku. I've done it multiple times. It's very, very easy isn't quite the right word, but the team has done a great job in terms of making it really clear that it's, a certain number of commands. There's a tremendous amount of support. And once it's up and running, one thing I wanted to note, which was that Infura and Teku are just announcing this really very cutting edge form of sync because now there is about 20 megabytes ish of data of the beacon chain, and it can take some time to sync up to the beacon chain itself. So not even to ETH1, but now even talking about the sort of ETH2 and how that's building. And so, but Teku has a really wonderful startup flag called initial state, and you can feed in a trusted initial state. And if you want to read more about that, there's documentation. It's also in the fourth part of the series that I wrote. We're also publishing a blog post about it this week. And Infura is providing an ETH2 endpoint. So there's this really nice image where you can get a trusted endpoint that the Teku client will check. So it's not a centralization point in as much as it is a way to be able to quickly get people online and be able to check that state with other peers in their network. But it reduces the time from, hours to, minutes, if that. It's really sort of, hundreds of seconds, which is wildly impressive compared to the other clients. So that's really exciting. Just before I go into monitoring, just want to see if there are any. Just going to sort of check the chat here. Any questions? Can you harness the depository and test it? Okay, give me 1 second. I'll give me 1 second, Shay, actually. So this is just monitoring. This is this great dashboard that the Teku team has built on Grafana. So this is my actual node back in January, I believe. And then this is the Beacon Chain app, which is actually checking sort of my, this is just from Beacon Chain itself. It's not my validator necessarily, but it's a great way to just sort of make sure that your client is still up, if there are any server issues, that sort of thing. And then this is the great UI that the Teku team built for the API, which is great. And then, yeah, I think that's it. Shay, I actually am happy to go through the questions. I can just look at it. Yeah, it's no
yeah,
problem.
sure. If you can look at it, go for it.
Yeah, totally.
I'll just, I'm going to let me know when you read it. I'll just start recording question, answer.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just do the Aladdin's question. So I'll answer that now, and then I'll toss it to Ben for Nicholas's comment. So can we rehearse the deposit journey on testnet? So Ben, I actually might need your help on this one because I'm not sure which testnet is up right now. Short answer is that if there's a testnet, you can do it. You can walk through using Gurley. But Ben, do you have more information on that actually?
Yeah, we have two testnets currently, Piermont and Prata. Piermont will be going away in a few weeks. We'll start doing cruel experiments on it. So best to try the Prata network. And you can use the same launchpad process and all of that. If you need some Gurley ETH, which is testnet ETH1 ETH, feel free to ping me on Slack and I can send some over. I have a stash.
Gurley whale alert. Okay, so that's that question, Shay. And then how about Nico's question there, Ben? I think that's probably best for you to.
Yeah, good question. A certain amount, there's an act of faith in putting down your 32 ETH that you'll be able to get it out one day, because the withdrawal mechanism has not yet been designed. So you are putting a lot of trust into the ETH2 devs. There are two ways to specify your withdrawal keys currently. There's the old way, which is the BLS way that Coogan outlined. Recently, we introduced a new way, which reflects the new roadmap. So as your withdrawal credential, you can specify an ETH1 address, which is much simpler and more obvious that you've got it right. And the commitment is that as long as you follow the spec, then we will enable withdrawals. But indeed, you are putting some trust in the ETH2 devs.
Ben, can you go over that really quick? Because I'm not sure. That's specifying the ETH1 address that people can withdraw to?
Right. So when you use the CLI for deposit, when you download that, you now have an option to either use a BLS withdrawal key, which is, I think, the route that you and I went through because we were early. But now you can just specify a standard ETH1 account as the withdrawal address. When withdrawals are enabled, you'll be able to send a special ETH1 transaction, a normal transaction, pay the gas fee, and your rewards or your deposit will be sent to that ETH1 address, and only that address. You won't be able to withdraw to a different one. So you commit to it when you sign up as a validator.
That's really kind of it from my end. I'm happy to walk through anything. Or Ben, did you have anything you wanted to expect?
There's one more question, Coogan, that popped up from Paz. Is there a simple step-by-step how-to doc/link somewhere? Sorry if I missed it.
Yes, no, not a problem. So Teku has a great series of docs, but I can also just share with you the links to my articles. It is that step-by-step process. So there's not a simple one because it's a rather sophisticated orchestration of different tools, but it is straightforward, and there's a great team in the Teku Discord, and all the client teams have great support as well.
And it was the one you shared earlier. Could you share that again on the chat?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay, great.
Yeah, highly recommend Coogan's articles. Really good read.
And so Ben and Coogan, anything else? And could you move the slide to the last one, Coogan, when you have a chance? The one that you're sharing, the very last slide. Or whoever has that, Ben.
I actually shared it. Yeah, I'll do it.
It's okay. Great timing. I'm glad that we were able to get a lot of great questions from all of you guys. Thank you very much. And yeah, thank you, Ben and Coogan. Another great workshop. And I know that there was a lot of stuff covered, but if you have any other questions, you want to follow up with Coogan or Ben, please reach out to them on Slack. And of course, you know, the docs that he just posted in the chat, I'm sure there's a lot of great info there too. Also, make sure to follow us on ConsenSys Hackathon 2021 Slack channel. That is going to be where we keep posting, you know, more workshops that you can check out, as well as if you're interested in participating in the hackathon, you can sign up, and then we'll help you put together a team and give you all the next steps. But it can be really exciting. Lots of great prizes to win, even by attending these workshops. So hopefully you guys can continue to come to more workshops and actually be in the hackathon itself. And in terms of anything else, Coogan or Ben, any parting words on this subject? Any takeaways for everybody on the session?
Well, no. Feel free to read up on ETH2.news. That's where I publish every 2 weeks update.
Nice.
What's going on there. It's a little bit technical, but I just write about stuff I'm interested in. And keep an eye on what Coogan's producing. There's lots of good stuff there. And I do recommend reading those articles, even if you're not planning to set up your own validator. You'll get a lot of insights that are terrific. Shay, thank you for hosting. It's been
thank you.
Super.
Thank you, Ben and Coogan. And thank you, everyone. And please, we would love to see you in the next one. So thank you again, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming.